Hi everybody, Adrianne Wagner, counselor and author of A Mother's Hidden Grief, back with you now to talk about common grief reactions, common behavioral grief reactions that we have after the loss of a loved one. This is the fourth short video in the series of common grief reactions. And just want to touch base with you on what it looks like when you are grieving behaviorally, right? This can look like blaming yourself or blaming other people. Behaviorally, a lot of times people will isolate themselves or avoid other people, and for sometimes good reason, because people that aren't grieving or haven't had a loss sometimes say really stupid things, right? So it can be hard to be around people because the triggers are all over the place. People will say things like, shouldn't you be over it by now? Well, God needed another angel. All these things that they try to help, but they just are ignorant to the fact that it doesn't help. So it's totally understandable if you're isolating yourself or avoiding people, why you're doing that, why you're reacting to your grief in that way. There can also be change in your activity level, an increase or a decrease in work. Maybe you're working more, maybe you're working less, maybe you're traveling or home more, home less. It's all about just trying to change things up so that a lot of times it can be avoidance of grief, avoidance of memories, avoidance of feelings. And so behaviorally we change up things a lot of the time. Neglecting oneself is another thing that we do after someone we love has died. It's this, the sadness and the depressive symptoms of just not caring or not wanting to take care of ourselves, or even blaming ourselves, so we just kind of take it out on ourselves, and that shows up in not eating well, not sleeping well, drinking, drugging, neglecting our physical care in some way or another. Loss of interest in work, in the world, in social activities, in sexual activity, all of that stuff is a common grief reaction when we're talking about how we respond behaviorally. And we touched a bit on alcohol and drugs and medication. Sometimes people use those as a coping tool. And, I wasn't sure how much to share here, but, I'll get vulnerable with you guys. I remember leaving the hospital after my daughter died 15 years ago and looking over at the car next to me, and they were laughing. And it just seemed so surreal because I was thinking, here are these people, they don't know that my baby died, that a baby died, and my whole world has changed. My whole world feels destroyed. And these people, their life is the same. And it was just a real isolating, lonely, shocking feeling. And my coping skills weren't, they were pretty good. I've been in the mental health, working in the mental health field for a while. But in that moment, in my really hard traumatic grief, and in the couple weeks to come after that, I didn't use healthy coping skills. So I had an emergency C-section, so I had pain medicine, and I found, which many people do, that pain medicine could help numb the trauma and numb the pain. And so for a solid 2 weeks, I was keeping myself very well medicated. And in all honesty, I was even drinking some, which was very dangerous, obviously. And I remember having, this idea that I just didn't care, and that I just didn't care if I lived or died. Felt like my body failed me, and I didn't care what I did to it. And so that was a solid 2 weeks where I was really checked out and choosing some unhealthy coping skills. And we do that behaviorally. We lash out, we avoid and isolate, or we blame ourselves. And I think I was doing a little bit of all of that, so it can be a mixture too. But it was a scary time, I think, for people that loved me. And so what turned my behavior around? I remember being really out of it. And I remember thinking, knowing on some level that it was, this is dangerous. This isn't a good way to cope with my grief. And what it really came down to for me is that I wanted my baby's life to matter. I wanted her life to count for something. I wanted to leave a legacy for her. And obviously, I wasn't going to be able to do that if I was dead. And I wanted so much to show the world how important she was that I stopped, and I let myself really feel the grief and fall apart. And in that falling apart, I was able to rebuild myself into a different person and a different life. And it's, again, not the life I wanted, but it's the life that I was given. And I wanted to make it count. So those were my motivations for stopping and getting myself together and reaching out for help. Obviously, my motivation now for the work I do is a little bit different. There's still that aspect of wanting to make Mara's life count and matter, and leave a legacy in her name. But it's also because I don't want people to feel isolated and alone and like they don't have support. So again, I want to encourage people. I want to inspire people. I want to show them that there are possibilities even without the person that you love. And that it's okay to take your time getting there. So that's kind of the behavioral aspect of grief reactions, and I'll be back with our last video on common grief reactions soon.